Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's SRM Toolkit webinar. My name is Chris Rogers. I am a procurement specialist at New Zealand Government Procurement, working on the Government SRM project. I've had the pleasure of working with SRM subject matter experts at State of Flux to develop 2 SRM toolkits with additional guidance for agencies. We're so pleased to be able to present an overview of these toolkits to you today with some background to the Government SRM program. On your screen, you'll see the agenda for today's webinar. Shortly, I'll introduce our speakers. Today's speakers will be covering background to the SRM program and current state assessment of government's SRM capability, followed by an overview of the SRM toolkit, and then an overview of the templates within the toolkit. So our speakers today, first up we have Joe Day. Joe is the manager of the New Zealand Government SRM program at NZGP. Joe has an extensive background in SRM and has experience in implementing similar programs. Joe will be covering the background of the SRM program, as well as the current state assessment of the New Zealand Government SRM capability. Following Joe, we have Frank Lai. Frank is a management consultant from State of Flux and has been State of Flux's project lead for the SRM toolkit. Frank will be providing an overview of the toolkits. Following Frank, I'll be providing an overview of the segmentation templates in the toolkit. I'll now hand things over to Joe.
Thanks, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, over the last 12 months, we've been working on a project to establish a government SRM program. The objective of the program is to lift supply management capability across the New Zealand government and improve the way we manage strategic cross-government suppliers. So these are suppliers that multiple agencies rely on and are considered to be critical to the delivery of public services. This has been a discovery project with 2 work streams. The first work stream is around lifting capability. So this is around providing tools and guidance to agencies on how they can improve supplier management within their agencies. The second work stream is a proof of concept with 2 cross-government suppliers to demonstrate that a more coordinated approach to managing these supplier relationships will deliver greater value and mitigate risk across the system. The work we've done this year with State of Flux has provided a baseline of current maturity and practices, and we are using the findings to develop a business case and roadmap for the program. This year, State of Flux have worked with us to provide a current state review. So what they've done is a diagnostic of the New Zealand government's SRM practices. They reviewed over 100 pieces of agency SRM collateral and undertook several focus group interviews with different parts of the public sector to assess maturity against the 6 pillars of best practice. State of Flux assessed the New Zealand government against various indicators of best practice, including whether we have a clear definition of SRM and a value proposition, whether our executives and stakeholders are engaged with supply management, and whether we have the appropriate structure and governance in place to manage these strategic supplier relationships. As well as that, they looked at whether SRM has a clear role definition within agencies and if people have the right level of capability. One of the other pillars is around technology and systems. So they had a look at what current technology and systems we have in place to support an SRM program across government. And of course, our practices for collaboration with suppliers. State of Flux found that our practices were developing according to global standards. The results indicated opportunities to improve across all pillars. However, there were some agencies that had some really good practices in place. State of Flux have provided a number of recommendations for improvement. One of the key aspects of a supply management program is around how we can become a customer of choice with our key suppliers. So as well as undertaking that internal assessment of practices, State of Flux also surveyed over 70 strategic suppliers identified through the significant contracts reporting that agencies undertake every year. And we wanted to understand how these suppliers view the relationship with the New Zealand government as a whole. The great thing about this survey is it gets the supplier's perspective on how they view the relationship with government. And it looks at different attributes to what makes up a good relationship with suppliers. We looked at things like how open we are to growth and innovation, our sustainability strategy, how suppliers view our contracting and commercial negotiations, and various operational and transactional practices, and of course, our overall relationship with them. The survey with suppliers found that overall, our customer of choice score was around 3.4, which actually isn't too bad. But suppliers' responses indicated that there is some room for improvement, particularly in the area of sustainability. Suppliers told us they don't have a clear understanding of the government's sustainability strategy, and this presents a really good opportunity for us to improve in these areas.
Thanks, Jo. As mentioned, NZGP partnered with State of Flux to develop 2 SRM toolkits to support agencies' SRM capability. The first toolkit that's been developed, which is called a Toolkit for Professionals, is intended for professionals operating with and alongside the procurement team, which may include the executive leadership team, senior leadership team, and other business units that may hold or influence supplier relationships. This toolkit is designed for procurement teams to share with stakeholders to educate and encourage a more uniformed approach to SRM across your agency. The second toolkit is the Leaders Toolkit. This toolkit is a more in-depth and is designed to help your agency establish a uniformed and coordinated approach to SRM. For agencies with an established SRM program, this toolkit will help agencies increase their capability and will offer them an ability to have a more uniformed approach to SRM that aligns with government as a whole, which is expected to improve the supplier experience and increase the New Zealand government's customer of choice score. This toolkit is comprised of 3 parts: setting up SRM, which largely covers segmentation, implementation, and mobilisation. The Professionals Toolkit and Part 1 of the Leaders Toolkit are now available at procurement.gov.nz. I'll now hand things over to Frank to provide an overview of the toolkits.
Thanks, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, now we'll go through the 2 toolkits in a bit more detail. The first toolkit is the Toolkit for Professionals, and this toolkit is intended for professionals operating with and alongside the procurement team. The intention is to align SRM practices across the government, and you can see on the screen the 2 main parts to this. The first part is supplier segmentation, and this provides an overview of supplier segmentation and the benefits of doing it. Segmentation is explored in further detail in the Leaders Toolkit. The second part is delivering SRM, which provides tools for stakeholders to interact with suppliers regularly. And there are 5 key areas in this part of the toolkit. The first one is performance management, which includes a balanced scorecard tool to help provide a better understanding of current supply performance and how to manage it. It also includes a supplier meeting planning tool, and this can be used as a guide when setting up supplier meetings. The second area is the monitor and improve, and this outlines ways to monitor and improve supply performance. The third area is service improvement plans, and it's used to respond to any significant failure in service that can't be resolved at the operational level. The fourth one is capturing and measuring value, and really it's a case study template to document value creation in a consistent and transparent manner. And finally, we have innovation, which outlines different ways to approach innovation and provide guidance for stakeholders to assess innovative ideas and provide recommendations. The next slide here shows the Leaders Toolkit, and again, we'll go through this in a bit of detail. So this Leaders Toolkit is intended for procurement and agency leaders, and for those who are looking to provide SRM leadership within their agency. And the aim really is to capture value over contracted obligations with the suppliers. You can see there that the 3 main steps to it. Step 1, as Chris mentioned, is already published on the website. Step 2 is coming in Feb 2022, and then step 3 in April 2022. Now we'll go through each of the steps in a bit more detail. Within step 1 of the Leaders Toolkit is setting up SRM, and this really is about building the foundations internally within the agencies. As you can see there are 3 main areas within this step. First one is SRM value proposition, which identifies the value SRM will bring and discuss how to measure and share value. There's also an area on supplier segmentation, and this provides guidance on supplier segmentation. The intention is to improve consistency of segmentation practices across agencies. And there are also two tools within this section. There's a category segmentation tool and a supplier segmentation tool. And it includes a step-to-step guide on how the segmentation process works. Within the engagement strategy area, it provides guidance on how to engage with suppliers. And this differs based on the tier level suppliers have been segmented into. The next slide here shows the supplier segmentation and engagement strategies. And really, it determines how strategically important the supplier is to the agency. And it informs the engagement strategies for each supplier. And it allows agencies to allocate resource, time, and effort wisely. The process involves using weighted criteria to assess risk and opportunity presented by supplier relationships. Some of the factors to consider include suppliers' ability to consistently supply, ease of accessing alternative suppliers, their criticality to performance, suppliers' ability to provide value, and also suppliers' likeliness to cooperate. So typically suppliers are segmented into different tiers, and you can see on the screen that it's the strategic tier, collaborative, managed, and tactical. With the different tiers, the engagement focuses on different aspects. For example, you can see that the strategic tier, most of the focus will be on relationship and risk. In the tactical tier, it's mostly about improving transactional efficiency. So really, the aim is to help agency use resource more efficiently and really just focusing on suppliers that generate the best improvement outcomes. In step 2 of the Leaders Toolkit, it's about implementing SRM, so how to kick things off internally within the agencies. The aim is to uncover value opportunities beyond the contract. Some of the examples of value include contract performance and risk optimization, innovation, being a customer of choice for your suppliers, and also risk reduction. The supplier value proposition helps provide guidance on how to set up supplier-specific SRM value proposition and to help better understand value that suppliers will bring. There's also a RAISE, which is a responsibility matrix, which establishes roles and responsibilities for all supplier interactions. And in step 3 of the toolkit, that's the mobilization stage. So really, that's where the rubber hits the road. And it's about helping agencies kick things off with the strategic suppliers. And there are 3 main areas within this step. The first one is a value proposition, and that helps agencies prepare business case and allows you to deliver value with the supplier. There's also an area on a 360-degree relationship assessment, and that's about assessing the strength of the supplier relationship and really baselining the current relationship's health and identify areas that require improvement. There's also some guidance around joint business plan, which helps manage and deliver joint objectives for your agency and suppliers. The tool covers purpose, scope, governance, and timelines as well. And then within this, there's also the SRM value proposition. So this helps you identify value beyond that's signed in the original supplier contract. Our state of flux research actually shows that leaders gain an average of 4 to 6 additional value from their suppliers through good supplier management practices. So these are the steps that we've got on the screen. The first step is to align with government objectives. And really, that's about identifying government strategic objectives and seeing how your agency's initiatives can align to it. The second part will look at identifying your agency's strategic objectives and understanding how you can deliver them. And then finally, it's to outline your SRM strategy and ensuring that it aligns with both the government and your agency's strategic objectives. We also have an area that helps to measure and share value. And you can see there are two main categories of value. So there's direct value, which is more the financial ones. So these are the ones that you can more easily quantify. Examples of this include cost reduction avoidance, net present value, and then return on investments. But there are also really good indirect values the SRM can bring, and these can be documented through case studies. Some of the examples of indirect values include risk, better service delivery, having access to your supplier's best resource, increased commitment from your suppliers, and then making it easier to do business with your suppliers as well. Now I'll hand over to Chris to go through the two segmentation tools with you.
Thanks, Frank. I'm now going to provide an overview of the segmentation tools in the Leaders Toolkit. An important part of this project is to agree on a more objective segmentation approach that can be adopted by agencies so that government as a whole is more coordinated in how we engage in SRM practices. This is to improve supplier experience and to increase our customer of choice score. The segmentation process we're recommending will be conducted in 3 steps. The first step is category segmentation, second step, supplier segmentation, and third step is stakeholder validation. I'll start with category segmentation. Category segmentation is segmenting your agency's contracts according to the spend and criticality. This creates a clear picture of how significant the category is and it will indicate the most beneficial SRM strategy to be adopted. On your screen, you'll see 3 images. On the right is a snip of the category segmentation questionnaire, which is found in the first tool. On the top row, you can input your agency's supplier categories. For this exercise, we've put in banking, IT, and software as a service. The questionnaire will allow you to review the risks and challenges your agency may face and score the categories accordingly. The image next to that in the middle is from another tab within the tool, within the template, which allows you to input the spend for each category for the financial year. Once you've filled out the questionnaire and the spend data, the template will provide a matrix that will summarize where each category sits across the 4 quadrants of managed, partner, tactical, and collaborative. This will give your agency a better understanding of each category and how vital it is to the agency's success. Once you've completed category segmentation, you then move on to supply segmentation, which is a separate tool within the toolkit. Here that you segment suppliers within each category. A suggestion is you focus on the categories that are ranked in the partner and collaborative quadrants. Supplier segmentation allows you to differentiate between suppliers within the same category and align the most appropriate treatment strategy. Much like category segmentation, the supplier segmentation tool has a questionnaire that helps you understand the criticality of each supplier. On your screen, you'll see on the left, you can see that there's a questionnaire that you go through for each supplier. Once you've completed that questionnaire, a tier graph will be produced that will rank your suppliers in tiers 1 to 4. This graph will then inform your supplier engagement strategies. Once you've completed category and supplier segmentation, you then move on to stakeholder validation. This is where you validate the output of the segmentation process by obtaining stakeholder buy-in. No segmentation model was 100% exhaustive. Relevant stakeholders must be able to challenge the output and identify factors that are not considered within the model and exceptions. Once you've gained stakeholder support, you can move on to applying the appropriate supplier engagement strategies. And with that, I'll pass things back to Frank to cover supplier engagement strategies.
Thank you, Chris. So once you've used the toolkit to segment the suppliers and you know which tier the suppliers belong to, there's actually a engagement strategies guidelines recommended within the toolkit. As you can see on your screen there, so for tier 1, the strategic suppliers, typically that's the one where it requires the most resource and we recommend going through all the engagement strategies outlined in Toolkit. Tier 2 are for the collaborative suppliers, and typically the activities are quite similar to those at Tier 1. Typically, the executive level sponsors might be less senior, and there might be less meetings involved as well. For Tier 3, the managed tier, most of the focus will be on contract, risk, and performance management. And then finally, for Tier 4, the tactical suppliers, most of the focus will be around improving transactional efficiency for these suppliers. There's also more guidance and more detailed engagement strategy outlined in the toolkit, and you can see there on your screen. So we actually have a few areas outlined. So you can see there's relationship management and development, contract, performance, cost, risk management. There's activities proposed for continuous improvement, value creation, and transactional efficiency as well. So this next, you can also then see a bit more example for relationship management and development. So you can see that there's different activities listed for the different tier suppliers. With this, I'll hand it back over to Chris to wrap it up for us.
Thanks, Frank. So we do appreciate you joining today to jump into the webinar, and we do hope that this is helpful for each agency. If you have any questions about the toolkit and future parts of the toolkit that are to be launched next year, please feel free to email us at governmentsrm@nv.gov.nz. Take care. Thank you.